Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I am speaking with a phenomenal woman who is a social justice advocate, an author, an international speaker on Black history, anti-racism, and women's issues. She was also a driving force in securing February as Black History Month in Canada. Please welcome Rosemary Sadler. Rosemary, it's so lovely to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's always so exciting to talk about Black History Month.
It really is. And, I think that there's probably people that think, why do we need Black History Month in Canada?
Yeah, and I get that because if you've never really thought about it, why would you question it? But for many people who look like me, and for many other people who never find themselves represented or mentioned or affirmed publicly somehow, it's a really critical time to have that moment. I went to school in this country and never really came away with an image of myself as having been someone who defend in history, not me personally, but as somebody who's derived from people who defended this country or supported this country in any way. And so it really does lead to all kinds of reinforces by omission the contributions, achievements, life experience of people of African origin in this country.
I'm on the West Coast and I went to school here in the 70s and 80s. Seems like it was just yesterday, but it was a long time ago.
It
And
was yesterday.
it feels like it. I don't ever recall learning about Black history in school.
Well, you're not alone. I never learned about it in school, and I may have gone to school before you. My children, though, also didn't learn about it in school. And I had all of my children went to Toronto schools. I would have to say that I was hurt by that realization because I think that I don't know if this is a process that everybody goes through, but I certainly did. I went to university and, you talk the great talks and you think the great thoughts and you come out and, get on with your life. And, then I had my children and it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm hearing back from them some of the same things that were happening to me or the same thoughts or same concerns that I had when I was going to school. And it really hit me like a ton of bricks how while things had changed, they really hadn't changed in terms of that perfect, wonderful, progressive world that we had talked about and perhaps planned on creating in university. So that was sort of the spark that got me looking around to see what could I connect to, what could I do to address that issue.
Mm. I've heard people here um, in BC say, "Oh, well, we don't really have Black people in BC."
And you do, because one of your first, what was his title? Was he lieutenant governor or premier? Wasn't it? Is it Mifflin Gibbs? No, James
Don't ask
Douglas.
me history questions.
James Douglas. He
Right.
was a Black man. You also had Black people who were coming into BC on the gold rush. You also had the Victoria Rifles, and best yet, you had the ancestors of Jimi Hendrix coming out of Hogan's Alley. So, there are connections to Black history, very much part of British Columbia. But it isn't really about the numbers. It isn't
Mm.
really about, well, okay, if I don't see any Black people, therefore I don't have to talk about them. It's about having a complete sense of the history of this country. If you have a history of this country that tells you that only white people have done anything, then it makes you resentful inadvertently of other people who claim to have citizenship rights here. If you feel that only one group has made the contributions or developed this country, it reinforces the negativity by omission. Black people have been a part of this country since 1604 with the arrival of the first named African, Matthew da Costa, who happened to be free, happened to be a really great linguist, great at contract negotiation, traveling with Samuel de Champlain, um, and was a member of one of the first fraternal orders, the Order of Good Cheer. This is all in early 1600s. There were Africans in Canada, the area we now call Canada, in the 1400s and the 1500s as coureurs de bois. And certainly cities such as Chicago and Detroit were founded by people of African origin because borders are pretty close and tight in those areas. So to consider that, we don't have a connection to Black history is a little bit untrue, and a little bit, just a little bit off.
I don't think a little bit. I think a lot.
A lot off. Well, yes, and and after Matthew in 1604, we have the arrival of the first enslaved arrival. Do you arrive? Just saunter in. But anyway, the arrival of the first enslaved African, Olivier Lejeune, who was about 8. He had been captured in Madagascar, brought into the area we now call Quebec. And even though he ended up later being converted to Catholicism, sometimes that conversion would mean that then people were considered to be people. That didn't change his status, and he remained a slave until he died. Slavery continued under the French, continued under the British, and we did not see the end of slavery in this land we now call Canada until 1834. So sometimes people want to say, well, we're different than other countries, we're different than the United States because we weren't founded on slavery. But I guess it really depends on how you look at the space that we're on. We are founded on top of the transatlantic slave trade and that impact. We are founded on top of colonialism and the enslavement of First Nations. We are founded on the enslavement of Africans. And the enslavement of Africans took place and existed for about 200 years. So this is all before Confederation. My own family background, which I didn't come to fully appreciate until I was a bit, not a little kid, but when I was married with kids, is connected to the first 4 waves of migration of people of African origin to this country, coming in as Black loyalists, late loyalists, War of 1812, refugees of the War of 1812, as well as, of course, the Underground Railroad. So this is both sides of my family. My family has been in this country since 1783. And there is rarely a moment in time when I meet people and they'll not want to know where I'm from, where I'm really from, as if, despite my English being my first language with some French that I learned at school, because the color of my skin suggests to them something different.
Mm-hmm. When someone says that, and I'm going to assume it's always a white person that asks that question.
When it's a white person,
yes,
it means that the assumption is that you cannot be from here.
Right.
When it's another Black person, the assumption is that, are you from where I'm from? And so it's with other Black people, it's looking for connection. With white people, often it's trying to find a way to other you or to externalize your connection to Canada.
So as parents raising kids today, why is it important that our kids know the history of this country? And why is, in a different way that you or I were taught, why is that important? Like, why? I always hear, oh, my kids are great. My kids accept everybody. So I don't know why I need to talk about all of this stuff. I don't know why I need to do that. They accept everybody. So why is Black History Month important in school?
Well, number one, I think that we all want to create good citizens. And what school is the great equalizer. You learn how to interact and deal with people who are exactly like you from your immediate neighborhood, people who are from other neighborhoods, people who don't look like you, who do look like you, who eat what you eat, who don't eat what you eat, who have different beliefs and different values, different religions. And it helps you in the being and in the experiencing appreciate and understand other people who may not be exactly like you and how you are in your household. But on a broader level, I think that if we fail to provide that kind of balanced history, if we, since we continue not to have required Black history from kindergarten to grade 12, there's no other time when someone who is resistant might feel that the need to introduce it. Black History Month was never created by the originator, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in 1926. It was never created to be the only time that you talk about Black people. I know it's a surprise, but I'm Black every single day of the year. And the idea is that we would be learning and reading and going to theater and art exhibits and the whole gamut of things Black and cultural and interesting all year. And so that during February, it would be a wonderful opportunity to share what you've learned and to actually have that time to celebrate. When we have incorporated more Black history, I think that it will make it easier for young people who become the adults of the future to find it possible that anyone can be anything, as opposed to only certain people are allowed to be in certain roles.
Hmm. And when it, do you believe there's systemic racism in Canada?
Absolutely, there is systemic racism. That would be, I mean, that's a given. Because we are a country founded on the transatlantic slave trade, the impacts of, and colonialism, we absolutely are. Even though it's, people forget that we build on top of things that have happened previously. And we have philosophers like Hume and Voltaire who told the world that Black people are incapable, that white people should be and deserve to be at the top of the social hierarchy and therefore are eligible and more than deserving without necessarily having merit, all of the rewards of living in particular countries. They were the people who helped to create the hierarchy that we still live with, where white people somehow are magically at the top of the heap and Black people are somehow magically at the bottom, no matter what. When we have our police force always having Black people as the examples of criminals in their training, I mean, we're constantly reinforcing that there's something wrong or criminal or inappropriate about Blackness. That comes from someplace. That comes from a papal bull that was issued in the 1400s that said that anybody that's not part of the Catholic Church can be exterminated because they're not real people. So, these things, while they seem like a long time ago, they continue in our practice and in all of our systems. When the church said Black people and heathens could be exterminated, when it was backed up by the politics, when it's backed up by philosophy, when it's backed up by politics, that's what makes it systemic, so that it's part of everything. And what seems normal now, white privilege, is not necessarily what's normal, but what has been created on the backs of people who don't happen to be white.
Hmm. Well, I think we see it in movies, in TV shows when we're growing up, and we don't even know what we're seeing. It's so, it's so subliminal. We don't even notice it. It's just a part of um what we experienced and saw on television growing up. And when you're little, you think that that is real life and this is the way real life is, when
Well,
in fact it's
and,
not.
and think about how challenging that is for a Black kid.
Mm.
If you're seeing on TV that all Black people, and this isn't the message that comes out direct,
Hmm.
this is
Hmm.
the message that you perceive from kids shows at the time, like they're better. They have, Sesame Street, thank God that ever came about. But they're in everything, in
Hmm.
books. When my one of my kids was in French immersion and she read Le Petit Prince, there's some elements in there that are really challenging. The writings of Gabrielle Roy, very challenging. And so it isn't just in English. It's not just in French. It's in every European power that at some point in time uh, was part of the global slave trade. So
Hmm.
I think, yeah, all that to say, yeah, absolutely, there is systemic racism. Absolutely, I could tell you before I had ever gone to school, I could tell you what all the stereotypes were about Black people, and I was very, very fortunate that in my case, and this is not to, I'm not trying to convert anybody to anything, but in my case, I had the opportunity to go to a Black church. And as a consequence, aside from the spiritual element, the other element, which was not just part of the experience, was that I was actually seeing a range of Black people doing incredible things. And that was my counter narrative to what I was living, breathing, and seeing all the time. And later, I had the opportunity to go around the province of Ontario to various other communities where Black people lived, and to see people in farming communities, to see people in mine towns, mill towns, and rail towns who had survived over generations, and how their lives were different than some of what we were going through in where I'm from in Toronto. It was my own lived experience countered what the world was telling me about me.
Mm.
Not everyone
Wow.
has that, and
Yes.
that is another reason why we need a Black History Month. For those people who are coming in from other countries, who have internalized by chance those stereotypes and incorrect perceptions about who is a Canadian. Ask a new Canadian, what is a Canadian? Ask them to describe that person, and they will tell you it's a white person. I went into a classroom once at East End of Toronto, and there was some discussion. I'd given a Black history presentation to a group of students, and I decided that where the conversation was going, we needed some help. So I thought I'd throw out a question to them. And I said, well, where do you think I'm born? And there were all kinds of guesses, none of them right. And then I asked them, where did they think my parents were born? And then I asked them, where did they think my grandparents were born?
Mm.
And in every instance, they guessed a place outside of Canada. Then I asked them, well, okay, I have told you that I'm Canadian. I have told you that my ancestors were born here. I have told you that my ancestors have been in this country since 1783. So, what does a Canadian look like? And they looked around the assembly hall and they picked out the blondest, most
Mm.
blue-eyed student in the group of about 500 people. And I asked that person to stand up and ask them where they were born, and they had come from Poland.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
it's what is that perception? And for new Canadians, sometimes the perception of what is a Canadian is not
Mm.
necessarily what a Canadian is.
Well, and it's interesting because you were talking to kids, you were talking to, students who, to no fault of their own, really, this is their idea. And that's your idea because that is the way that you have been brought up. And maybe that's the way your parents were brought up. So it's fascinating. But I just always remember, Rosemary, being told that Canada is a melting pot.
It
We are a
is.
melting pot, and so and when I ask you about, do we have systemic racism? I know the answer to that. You know the answer to that, but we still have, a large portion of people that don't think that there is systemic racism in Canada or in the US for that means. But, and so I think it really speaks to, we still have work to do. And yes, we do need Black History Month. And yes, this needs to be, part of curriculum in every school in this country for sure.
Well, I think
Uh,
that, sorry, just when you said that, if I could just mention this, I did
mhm,
an interview not so long ago with a Montreal reporter, and her comment to me was, I mean, there's another narrative, and that narrative is that um, while there may be Black people here, they don't apply to things, and so ultimately they're responsible for their own lack of involvement in some of these systems. And so I said to the Montreal reporter, but there you have a significant population of Black people from Haiti, from Sierra Leone, from Senegal, from the Cameroon. They are applying. I'm sure they are applying. You have a significant population. I have applied. We apply. We apply for these positions, but that's where systemic racism is more insidious because it's easy for someone on one side of the equation to say, "Oh, well, they don't apply." But what
mhm,
is it that happens between the time somebody applies and that processing and the outcome about who is finally selected? And this happens in terms of agencies, boards, and commissions and other appointments, not just the professional positions or the regular positions that people might be seeking. So
mhm,
it isn't just about, well, being nice. It's also about being able to make reasonable, um, um, live reasonable lives and take care of themselves and
mhm,
create some wealth to pass on to their children.
mhm,
Um, I, I was aghast going to New Brunswick one year, the first time I'd ever gone. My father's family hails from New Brunswick. And there I was, and I'm looking at, and this year's Canada Post stamp, one of them is reflective of one of these communities settled by early Africans arriving in New Brunswick. And I was horrified that I was taken to basically empty space, vacated lands, because people couldn't remain there because they didn't have the supports to remain there because there were sunset laws and all kinds of other restrictions that have impacted their ability to work and keep their land. But there were white communities that had been formed around the same time that continued to thrive. And it was such a stark reminder that from the very beginning, freedom doesn't equal equity. And so we still have to think about that, creating that peace.
mhm, mhm. I want to take a minute, Rosemary, to tell you about something that we're giving on behalf of you, because we really like to look for ways to give back with our podcast. And so Telus has been kindly giving $500 on behalf of each guest to something that's important to them. And you chose the Cooperative Housing Federation of Toronto, which is an association made up of member housing co-ops in the Durham, Toronto, and York regions. So we will be giving them $500 on your behalf. And the work you do really does reflect how important affordable housing is for people all across the country.
Well, I absolutely, affordable housing is critical for everyone. But, how much better if we also had the positions that we were actually trained to do and we could find those. But the
Mm-hmm.
reason that I chose this particular organization is because I happen to serve on the final selection committee that helps to select applicants that will receive scholarships. And every year they issue a number of scholarships to young people, mostly young people, but not always, who are living in the cooperative housing system. And I think it is just so amazing for them to be given the support, additional support, so that they can actually go to school and do the work and not have to work while going to school. So that is also part of it. It is about supporting affordable housing, but it's also about supporting people in their ability to pursue a higher education.
That's amazing. Now, just as we're nearing the end of our conversation, and I tell you, it's been wonderful speaking with you because you do have so much knowledge and history and passion around this. Because you were the past president of the Ontario Black History Society, and
Yes,
this was an unpaid position for 22 years.
yes,
So when somebody does something for 22 years unpaid, that means that it is something. It's a passion. It's a passion. It's of deep importance, and I mean, what you have done for Canada is pretty incredible. I know you have the Order of Ontario, and I mean, I know your face there. It is right there. I know your face just from being over here on the West Coast and seeing you speak at things. But where do when we invest in Black History Month as Canadians as a whole? We are moving our country in a positive direction for
absolutely.
everybody. And take a look at. Can we talk about Viola Desmond on the $10 bill? Like,
We can. Oh my
how
God.
hard was that to make happen? I
Well,
mean,
I wish I could say that I'm the person who made it happen, but in a particular sense, I think I was. I had the opportunity to meet Carrie Best and to interview Carrie Best many years ago. And in the process, she gave me information about Viola Desmond. So I made sure that I included that in the very first book that I wrote, which was called Leading the Way Black Women in Canada. And
Mm,
in giving the Black history presentations that I did in trying to build up a community of interest around Black history, I always would talk about her story because it was just phenomenal to me. And the story of Viola Desmond is one where people, I think, know that she essentially was arrested for sitting in the whites only section of a theater. And this is something that was replicated across the country in different ways in different times. But in her case, the experience resulted in an end of segregation laws in that she didn't even know existed in New Glasgow because that wasn't where she was from. She was from Halifax. Um, it ended those laws, but it was a very painful process for her. And in the process, it changed a lot of things for her personally. But on the other side of that, her sister, Wanda Robson, had gone back to university to take courses as an adult. And her professor one day was talking about this woman who was dragged out of the theater in New Glasgow. And she said, "Wait a minute, that's my sister." And so I would like to think that it was my efforts alerting people in this part of the in where I am in the Toronto area and Ontario, and Wanda's efforts in Nova Scotia, but it was more Wanda than me. And ultimately, she ended up on the $10 bill. I remember when I found out. I was actually the same day I found out from I was invited to, it was such a great honor. I was invited to a state dinner in Ottawa. So I was speaking at something in downtown Toronto. I was just found out about this wonderful um, announcement that Viola was going to be on the $10 bill. And then I flew to the state dinner and met Bill Morneau. He was at the state dinner. But guess who else was there?
mm.
This guy that's in the White House, Joe
Ah,
Biden.
right.
Yeah, so it was kind of a wonderful day. Yeah, Yeah.
And
Sorry.
no, but that's a great story, and thank you for sharing it. And it just shows that we do have this rich history um, of people who stood up for what is right and made deep sacrifices to their own safety and their family and everything. And we have this history, and I think that sometimes I want to ask you about August 1st and why it's important. I think that sometimes here in Canada, our focus is always on the US for these types of things. Like, oh, we know Rosa Parks, and oh, we know this, and always know that. We have our own stories here in Canada that need to be celebrated and remembered and honored and teach our kids about,
Well,
because right.
just to go back, I one thing I should have said about Viola Desmond, and please
Mm.
excuse me for missing this. This is a critical piece. This happened before Rosa Parks, and so I
Mm.
would, you many Canadian kids will know about Rosa Parks, and they will know nothing about Viola Desmond. And part of the reason is how educational materials are ordered. In Nova Scotia, there's one central place where all ordering is done. So one of my Black Canadian books was actually ordered by that central place and is in every school in Nova Scotia. But in a place like Ontario, and I believe in British Columbia, it's all very iffy. So one librarian, one school board, they do their own ordering.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, cost is a factor. Cost and lack of knowledge. So if you see there's Black history and it costs $1, and you see there's Black history and it's $10, and the one that's $1 happens to be American, and the one that's $10 or $20 happens to be Canadian, what do you buy? And I think that that has been part of the problem. We have had this influx of African American material, which is, of course, important to know. But in the process of getting that material, it pushes out or overrides knowledge or awareness, or even the idea that there could be Black history in this country again in another way.
Mhm.
So,
100%. I mean, I see that in BC just alone with Hogan's Alley. People don't understand or know anything about Hogan's Alley. And, it's 5 minutes from where I live, but there's
well,
no, why learn about that when you're hearing these other voices?
well,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
And I mean, I heard. Like in Canada, for example, we have the end of enslavement in Canada took place August 1st, 1834.
Yes. Tell me
Because,
about August 1st.
well, okay, yeah.
Tell me
We,
about why August 1st is this your next goal? Is
well,
this,
yeah, I'm hoping
yeah,
it's going to
yeah,
happen real soon.
yes.
Since, well, I was the proponent for February is Black History Month. I went to the city of Toronto to try to make sure that it was created. It was already done, but building upon what had already been done to make sure that it was secured as an annual thing. I got a proclamation from the province. I sought out support from federal representatives, and it ultimately was taken up and acted on by Jean Augustine, who was then parliamentary secretary. But around this early on, I also was trying to get August 1st as Emancipation Day recognized. And the reason for that is that that is the end of slavery in this country. And it allows for other conversations, and it's also taking place at a better time of year. It's warmer in August. No, that's not the real reason. But, I think it just extends the whole opportunity to have definite points in time when we should focus on talking about certain elements of African Canadian history. Um, but it was passed in June of 1833, and because there was no social media, no quick ways of getting information out, it took over a year for the information to get to all of the British colonies. So it was basically announced that it would then be effective August 1st, 1834. And that that ended it across this country. But I've heard that in British Columbia, some people have been celebrating Juneteenth. Well, that isn't when slavery in Canada ended. That is when slavery in Texas ended. And that was because
Mm.
of misinformation that had been perpetrated on purpose to keep some people subjugated just a little bit longer. I think what's important about August 1st as Emancipation Day is that it speaks to the resilience, it speaks to the agency, it speaks to, you know, some level of cooperation between and among abolitionists and those who were still enslaved. It definitely speaks to those things. It speaks to many other things as well, but I think that we can all agree on those positive elements.
So we are waiting for that to pass, are we?
I hope so. Right now, it's under the auspices of MP Majid Jahouri, and I would like to thank previous previous people connected to the federal level of politics, which included MP Deepak Obdrai, who now deceased, and much more recently, Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard.
Okay, well, that's something for us to all be aware of. And I mean, I will never forget that about August 1st again, because again, you're right, Juneteenth, this is what we hear. We hear these are the voices that we hear again through social media and stuff, because it's so centered on what happens to the south of us.
Well, and exactly,
yeah.
and there's so many dates that people can celebrate emancipation in the United States. There's 1863, 1865. There's another date in Washington, in the District of Columbia, which is in April, and I've been there for their emancipation celebrations. I've been to the states for their Juneteenth celebrations in different areas, but those our celebration is first. Which why is that so critical? There would be nothing called the Underground Railroad if there had not been August 1st as Emancipation Day. And why that's important, not that it's important because it was the first freedom movement of the Americas. It's important because that was the greatest single influx of people of African origin to this country, because generally they didn't come directly from Africa on slave ships into Canada. They came from Africa to the Caribbean or Africa to the United States, and from there maybe into Canada with their owners or as self-emancipated people. So between 20,000 and 100,000, depending on which interpretation of history you want to believe, African Americans became African Canadians as a result of that particular bill, because it guaranteed residents on Canadian soil you were free under the law.
Rosemary, you are incredible. And, you know, your books, you have written so many books. And as we wrap up, I just want to say, I tried to buy a couple of your books. I need to have a word with your publisher. Your books are fantastic, and you have some good ones for younger learners, and just a wealth of information in all of your books. If people can't find your books, can they go to your website and find more information there?
They can. Well, they can.
Okay, good.
I think that, I have books on Harriet Tubman, books on Marianne Shadd, but there are also online copies available of the kids' book of Black Canadian history.
I had a very hard time finding that one, so I'm going to look on your website because I want to get that one. That one looks absolutely perfect for my kids.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I will tell you what Rosemary's website is. It's Sadler is her last name, but just so you know, it's Sadlier. And you can go to her website, which is .me/Sadler.
About
Is that
Me.
right?
It's called About Me.
Oh, About Me.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. About Me, Rosemary Sadler. And you can follow her on Twitter, Rosemary Sadler, or on Facebook at rosemary.sadler. Rosemary, thank you so, so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And yeah, you've shared a lot of information here that is very helpful because we all want to be, we want to be allies, and we want to move this forward because it's important.
And we want you to be allies, and we want you to do the work. And we want to make sure that we all benefit from the improvements that will bring about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.